Alrighty, welcome to this first seminar in the series of 6, in which we will address several topics that are all related to genetics and breeding. Well, due to the pandemic, we are not able to have physical meetings at the moment, and that's the reason that we have set up this lineup of webinars, and we will start today. I will talk today about breeding values, how they are calculated, how they are estimated, what the advantages are of breeding values compared to other selection tools, and how you as a breeder can use breeding values for your breeding program, for your selection decisions. And we will discuss predominantly about the selection of mares. We often get a complaint as a stud book that we are too much talking about stallions and not enough about mares. So we will talk about mare selection most of this webinar. And I gave it the title, How do we select our mares? Do we that based on predicates or on breeding values? Well, you know that we select our mares based on predicates for, I think, at least the last 100 years. And breeding values are rather new in our industry. And so I will give a little explanation about the advantages of breeding values in our breeding program. Well, the essence of a breeding program is that we select the genetic best horses to produce the next generation of foals. And what makes that difficult, and the more experienced breeders know that the horses that are at face the best horses that have the best phenotype, are not always the best genetic horses. And what we should do is that we aim to select more for genotype, what's in the DNA of the horses, instead of selecting on phenotype. And that's what we can observe when we look at horses, when we are judging horses. And the equivalent is that we rather should base our selection on breeding values rather than on predicates. So that's a little bit of conclusion of this webinar, and I will give an explanation on why. And I mentioned learning moment or learning experience. And my learning experience was back in 1987 when I was a trainee. I was a genetic student, and I was a trainee in Ontario, Canada. And I came face to face with what is considered the best cow ever in the world, Brookview Tony Charity. Well, you maybe ask why a cow and not a horse. Well, I have a little history in dairy genetics as well. And actually, so my first jobs were in dairy genetics. And this Brookview Tony Charity, she was by far the best cow there was in the breeds. She was 3 years in a row. She was the grand champion of the most important shows in North America. She had a maximum score of 97 points for confirmation. She was a high production cow. And when I saw this cow at Hanover Hill Holsteins in Port Perry, Ontario, I thought, well, every breeding organization, AI stud, that has no sons of this cow in the barn, they can close their doors. Well, this cow, she was sold for a couple of $1 million. She was used for embryo transfer a lot, so she had a lot of offspring. But very soon we learned that her offspring was kind of average. None of her sons made it to be approved, and so that was a large disappointment. Well, in genetics we call these kind of cows or horses, we call those genetic freaks. They are just a coincidence of factors, but not genetically superior. Well, we know that in a horse breeding we see the same. We have had champions of the stallion show that were poor transmitters. They were kind of average stallions if you looked at the offspring. And we also know there are several model mares that have showed that they are kind of average brood mares. So that explains that not everything that we see is genetic. And many times we are fooled by that, and so that's why I also stressed in the previous sheet that we should rather select more for genotype instead of phenotype. Well, and actually selection for phenotype, that's selection for the predicates like we have done for at least 100 years. And well, I analyzed the judging results of the 3-year-olds in 2018 and 2019. In total, there were more than 1,000 mares judged in the Netherlands. And I looked to the status of the mothers, what their predicates were. And well, you can see that 11 3-year-olds, they were from Volboek mares. 27 of them became star. There were 78 from a studbook mare. 26% went star. Well, 775, the majority of the mares, the mothers, is star, and 36% of the offspring became star. 92 crown mothers with 45% star, and 60 model mares with 48% star. So you can see that the model mares do better as a brood mare than the crown mares, and they do better than the star mares, and the star mares do better than the studbook mares. So that's in accordance what we expect. So in that way, phenotype selection, selection for predicates works. Well, I also looked at some other predicates by the mothers. So you see that the sport mares, that 42% of the offspring became star, prevalent 51, and Prestatie 44. So these sport mares, you know, so they might be star sport mares or crown sport mares or model sport mares. So it's good to see that that actually the prevalent mares did the best, and so that also expresses the value of the prevalent predicate. So that's maybe a little bit in contrast to the conclusion. Well, I also looked at the mothers of these 3-year-olds, and I actually selected them for breeding value. Well, and then you see that you even have a better result if you select the mothers based on breeding values. So when I looked at the mares, the mothers that had a breeding value for conformation and movement of at least 107, and there were 95 of those, even 70% of the offspring went star. So the horses with the highest breeding value actually did a lot better even than the model mares, and also better than the prevalent mares. So actually this is the best proof that selection for breeding values is a lot more powerful than selection for predicates. So now I try to explain the reason why breeding values are better than predicates. Well, if you look at the predicates, you only look at the conformation and the movement, or the IBOP or the ABFP of the horse itself. And with breeding values, you also include the genetic value of both sire and dam. So you include the pedigree. So in predicates, the pedigree is not included. And so that's actually the item that makes breeding values more valuable, that you have both the own performance, the phenotype, so that could be a judging result, it could be an IBOP result, could be an ABFP result, and you combine those with the sire and the dam information. And later on, especially for stallions, it's very important to look at the offspring as well. If you have a stallion with 70 offspring, his own performance and also the performance of his sire and dam are not important anymore, then the breeding values are only based on the offspring. So that's one of the reasons, the first reason that breeding values are more powerful than predicates. The second is that we try to adjust all our phenotypical information, so our judging results, by factors that cause bias. So what we do in estimating breeding values is that we compare horses that have been judged in the same classes. So that means that you compare horses that have been judged under exactly the same circumstances. You adjust also for age. You could imagine that a 4-year-old is more powerful than a 3-year-old, so a 4-year-old should have better score, higher scores for movement. We also adjust our phenotypical information or judging scores for gender. We all know that stallions have slightly higher scores for conformation than mares. And we also adjust for the jury. And well, we try to have the differences between jury as little as possible, but still we know that there is some difference in terms of the average result and also the variation in scores. And so we are able to monitor those, and we are able to adjust our breeding values for the difference in jury. So that makes the breeding values more powerful. So the first is that we also use the pedigree of a horse, include those in the breeding values. And second is that the phenotypical information is adjusted for non-genetic factors: age, gender, jury, and circumstances. And the third is that we also adjust for the other parent of an offspring. You could imagine that the offspring of a mare are better if they are sired by a good stallion compared to a poor stallion. So we try to figure out what the credits are of a mare, and we adjust the quality of the offspring by the quality of the sire. And that's if we calculate breeding values for mares, and for stallions the other way around. We all know that the one stallion is used on better mares than the other, and you want to adjust for that, because it wouldn't be fair that the stallion that is used on better mares will have a higher breeding value. So now it's totally unimportant for the breeding values if a stallion has a lot of chances by using them on good mares, good quality mares, instead of mares that have a little more an average quality. So that's 3 reasons that breeding values are more powerful than predicates. Question is, how do we weigh performance, the own performance of our horse, against the pedigree? Well, this picture shows that, again, that not everything that we observe is genetic, because you see 2 pictures of the same guy and in a completely different condition. So it depends on what day you've seen this guy to judge his phenotype. And so the way we weigh performance against pedigree is that depends on what we call the heritability. And heritability is the percentage of the difference that we see between horses, among horses, that is caused by genetics. And we see a difference from trait to trait. The one trait, you see that the influence of the environment is a lot more than for the other trait. And I will give you a couple of examples in the next sheet. So if we look at that horses that are on traits that have a high heritability, I think the most important one is height at withers. And you see that height at withers is hardly influenced by the environment. And the same is true for instance, the head, the scores for the head of the horse, and that's hardly influenced by the environment, what you can understand. Also the length of the upper arm, also the major breakdown trait, racial type, and also the trait trot is less influenced by environment, and that's why they have a relatively high heritability. We also have traits with a lower heritability, and for instance, the front legs, straight and standing under, has an extremely low heritability. And you could imagine why, because it's for judges hard to judge this trait, because it's a lot influenced by the runner. Even if you have a horse that naturally is standing under, he can be presented to the judges more straight. Also, bone quality is a trait that could be influenced by, for instance, feeding or other things. And so that's why we see that the heritability is lower than the traits on the left. Also, the length of the group, and that could be a little more difficult to understand why the heritability is lower for that trait, because you couldn't find a way that's influenced by the environment. So that's maybe a trait that's hard to judge by our judges. Also, feet and legs, the major breakdown trait feet and legs is lower than the traits to the left, and also the trait walk has a lower heritability than, for instance, trot. That means that that walk can easier be influenced than trot, or is a more difficult trait to judge. Well, also, if you look to sport results, then we see a high heritability in ABFP test and a very low heritability in sport results. And these are the sport results from the competition sport, from our sport federation. And it's easy to understand why the ABFP tests are held under conditioned circumstances with the same riders, same judges, and the sport results are, of course, also very much influenced by the rider. And well, that's also a reason that we are rather keen on the ABFP test in our breeding program, because first is that the information is coming at a young age, so you can use it in your breeding program a lot earlier than sport results. And second, because of the higher heritability. Well, it's actually the heritability that depends, or that makes the degree that the performance of a horse is weighed against the pedigree. If you have a trait with a low heritability, the breeding value has more emphasis on the pedigree, and if you have a high trait with a high heritability, the breeding value has more emphasis on the performance of the horse. For instance, so if you have a mare by Jasper, for instance, that's tall, you can be rather sure that she is genetically a tall horse as well, so she will throw offspring that have a good height and withers. On the other hand, if you have, for instance, the opposite, a daughter by, for instance, Pier, who is siring tall horses, and this Pier offspring is rather short, you would rather combine her to a stallion that's adding height to this mare. The other way around is true as well. If you have, for instance, a mare that's sired by Beard, and he is one of our highest transmitters for walk, and this Beard daughter has an average walk, I wouldn't be too concerned, because we know that the heritability of walk is rather low. So, so genetically, the Beard offspring, the Beard daughter with an average walk, will be genetically better than what you expect. And the other way around is true. If you have, for instance, an offspring by Tjerk with a long walk, you still would be careful in mating this mare to a stallion with a good walk. So that explains how we implement this heritability in our breeding values. So it depends on the heritability of a trait, how much the performance of a horse is weighed, and how much the pedigree is weighed. Well, this is one of my favorite pictures I use a lot in my presentations, and this is how people see genetics very often. That's that 1 + 1 is 2. Well, we know in practice, like actually this picture is showing, but we all know that full sips are always different, except for the identical twins, who are exactly the same. But if you have many full sips, you will see different results. So the picture on this sheet is not how it works for genetics and for breeding. So on this next sheet shows the variation among full brothers or full sisters. If you, for instance, have if you make several matings with a parent average, an average breeding value for whatever trait with an average of 109, about 30% of the offspring will also have a breeding value of 109. But, well, you also have horses that will have a higher score, and you can see that about 5% will have a breeding value of 115, and those are the ones that you are looking for. On the other hand, you can also have an offspring that's a lot lower than the parent average, and 5% will be at like 103, so they will be a lot less than what you would expect from the parent average. And this is something that you have no influence on. We all know that both parents, they transmit 50% of the genes, but you never know which 50% of the genes is transmitted. And you could be lucky if from both parents the best 50% of the genes are transmitted, but you could also have bad luck that 50% of the worst genes of both parents are transmitted to the offspring. So this is just a matter of bad luck and luck, and well, sometimes people say that breeding is gambling. Well, to some extent that's true, but you make also the decisions with which parents you are breeding, and so that has a big influence. And the other part is just a chance. It's just having luck or having bad luck which genes are transmitted by both parents. And I thought it was good to have a little example for this, and this is actually a well-known example. We have one mare that was mated to the same stallion 7 times. It's the mare Boukje C. She is a studbook mare that is prevalent with 9-star offspring, and she has 7 offspring by Beard, who are all judged. There are still 2 younger ones coming, but 7 of them have been judged. And what you see in this sheet is the parent average for our breakdown traits for height and withers, for racial type, for frame, feet and legs, walk, and trot. So that's the parent average, like I showed in the previous picture with the graph. And these are the results of the 7 offspring. The one on top is the most well-known. He is the approved stallion, mine to 490. He's approved in sport, and you see also his the 2 full brothers, Dan C and Flip C. They both went to the 70-day test as well, so it's quite unique that you have from one mare 3 sons in the 70-day test. So Dan and Flip didn't make it, and Mine was approved. And you also see 3 mares, Aukje, Renske, and Nienke, and they all became star, and Nienke was a star mare with the first premium. Then you see the breeding values for these horses. And so the highest ones of the full brothers or full sisters is in green, and the other one in red. And then you see for all the traits that there is a difference between of like 4 or 5 points of index. And well, actually this is maybe not so good example. You could imagine that if one of these 7 full sisters, full brothers, was a studbook mare or a stallion that didn't go star, that the difference would be a lot higher. So if you compare the average of these 7 full sisters, full brothers, full sips to what is the parent average, you see that they are all slightly higher than the parent average. So you might say that this breeder had an over average, above average on luck on this combination. And of course, maybe it was a very good mating, but well, I think if you have 7 full sips with the same pedigree and they all go star, and you have 1 approved stallion, you can't complain about your luck. So luck, that's something, luck and bad luck, that you have no influence on. I call it luck and bad luck. In genetics, we call that Mendelian sampling. That's a term you may forget. But what you have influence on is what which parents you use for breeding. And in the previous sheets, you saw a graph of one combination of a mare and a stallion. And in this graph, you see two combinations of parents. And the one has a parent average of 109, that's the blue graph. And there's one that's red. And you see the blue one has a parent average of 109. And the other one the red one has a parent average of 103. So you would expect the better offspring from the parent average of 109, of course. But you see, in some cases where in this red mating you have a lot of luck, you have a better result than in the blue mating where you have a lot of bad luck. So this is also to not be discouraged that you don't have a mare in the top 100 mare list, for instance, because you can have success also as well with parents that are maybe not as high. But again, in that cases, you need a little bit more luck than average. So that shows what your chances are when you're using good genetics and maybe not quite as good genetics. But you still have a chance to have that extremely good horses that have a breeding value for 100 and a higher score than 110, for instance. So in 2019, we introduced a total index. And the reason that we did that is that we would like to have a ranking of stallions and mares. So in the past we presented those just on alphabetic order or on age, but we thought it would make sense that to indicate also which are the better horses in the breed, to be able to rank them. And so what we're trying to do is to rank our mares and also our stallions based on their overall genetic merit. And the overall genetic merit, that's a balanced weighing of our selection traits. And so the one selection trait is more important to the other. And a third thing that's important is that that we want to have an optimal genetic progress for all the selection traits, but we don't want to have an extra increase of inbreeding. You could imagine that we only make use of the very top horses, that would lead to a lot of inbreeding. Well, inbreeding is, by the way, a topic in our next webinar, our second webinar, but also in designing this total merit index, this total index, we adjust for the level of inbreeding as well. So the way we do that is if we look at the selection traits, conformation and sport aptitude or gait, that it is in a ratio of 40%, 60%. Well, that may sound familiar because the major breakdown traits for conformation and movement, also when we judge a horse, we say we have a 60% emphasis on movement and 40% emphasis on conformation. So in our total index, we also have 40% emphasis on conformation, 60% emphasis on sport aptitude over movement. And our second is that we have 80% emphasis on our breeding goal traits. So that's, for now, that's conformation, that's movement. In the future, that will also be indexes or breeding values for sport, for instance, for maybe longevity, for character. But for now, it's only movement and conformation. And that is emphasized with 80% over kinship 20%. And with this ratio, we make sure that selection based on the total merit index, that will not lead to an extra increase of inbreeding, because we feel that's very important for a breed to keep the inbreeding numbers down. So we will discuss that in our second webinar. Yeah, you may have seen the top list of our mares that are selected or that are ranked for total index. We publish those annually in December, and you'll see which are the highest mares in this list. It's a list of the 1,500 best mares or high indexing mares in our population. Well, what you see, by the way, is if we look at the predicates of these horses, that there's rather high predicates with at least star, but also crown and model, and also the triple A's and the double A's, which is the predicate for the performance test, ABFP and IBOP. So what we can do with this list is to identify the most valuable mares in our breed, and especially of the top 20, which is listed here. It would be a good idea, for instance, to use them for embryo transfer. We would like to see more offspring of our best mares. So with this list, you could indicate which mares are valuable enough to use embryo transfer on, for instance. Well, not every mare is in the top list. Of course, you can look up the breeding values of your mare in my KFPS. And we will work on that. The total merit index is listed there too. So now you only see the underlying breeding values for the conformation traits and for the movement traits. And I think also the breeding values for all those individual linear traits, they can be used for instance, finding a good stallion for your mare. So that's will be one of the webinars later on in this program. And so you could use, for instance, the linear score sheet to identify the traits that are maybe not the strongest in a mare, but maybe it's, or I think it's better to look at the breeding values for those individual traits. So for which traits you're searching for compensation by the stallion for your mare. But that's a topic that will be in another webinar later on. It's interesting to see, for instance, in the top 100, which predicates they are. And you see that there is even a stud book mare in this top 100, and you would expect, with plenty star and crown and model mares, that there wouldn't be any stud book mares in the top 100. Well, this stud book mare is the full sister or a 3/4 sister to the mare that's on third place. So the model, the breeding estimation model, breeding value estimation model says, well, maybe the scores for this horse are not quite that high, but with having this good 3/4 sister, we expect her genetically to be better than what you would conclude from her scores from her own performance. Well, you see 40 of these mares are from our star, 41 are crown, 18 are model. Well, you would maybe expect higher numbers for crown and model. But what you see as well, that many of these star mares are very young star mares, and so they may be crown or model in a couple of years. And well, we also have to, we know that we have a genetic progress, and that means that also that younger mares, they have in average higher breeding values than older mares. And that's also the reason that we don't see many prevalent mares in the top 100 or prestatie mares in the top 100, because well, prevalent mares are maybe 15 years old and older, and well, some of these star mares are maybe from one generation younger, or maybe even 2 generations younger, and they are sired by, for instance, the newer, higher sires. What you also see is that like 75% of the mares in the top 100 have a performance test, an ABFP or an IBOP, and especially those that have the higher scores, which have the tag AA and AAA. So they score very high in this list. So in order to be high in this list, it's good to have high scores in the judging ring, but also high scores in one of the performance tests. Well, you could also make other rankings, and I've seen on Facebook that we publish those top lists in Excel, so everybody can make his own or her own rankings. And an interesting ranking is if you look, for instance, in the low kinship mares within the top 400 total index. And this sheet shows the 20 low kinship mares that have a kinship lower than 16.5, so that's more than a percent below average. And you see that they still score rather high in the total index. And especially if you look at the pedigrees of these horses, to the sires, the maternal grandsires, the maternal great grandsires, the next, the fourth sire, you see all kind of stallions that had a less impact in our breed. So actually these are very interesting mares to help our breed both to become to increase quality, but also to keep our kinship low. So also this list of mares could be very interesting to use for embryo transfer, for instance. So, like I said earlier, if we look at our total merit index, so the only breeding goal traits that are included is conformation and movement, sport aptitude. But we would like to include some other traits that are also listed in our breeding goal. For instance, character, competition, sport, and also longevity. And we know that the offspring of the one stallion is becoming older than the offspring of another stallion. We feel that longevity is a very important trait in our breeding goal. So it would be good to have some genetic information for those traits as well. So for longevity, we have some time to go, but for character and sport, we have already the first results. These are the breeding values for 4 character traits. And since 2013, we score our ABFP horses for 18 character-related traits, and it's quite a lot. But we also know that if we ask our members or our breeders, what do you think is important for character? The one is looking for a very reliable horse, very cool horse, and another one is looking for a horse with a little more sensible, that is has a good trainability. For some types of sport, you would look for more stamina or for more effort. So from these 18 traits, we have brought that down to 4. Because we feel it doesn't make sense to have too many breeding values for all these character traits. But you see the difference if you look at the top of the list. You look at Funger, for instance. He's doing well for all the character traits. If you look at Gerben, he is below average for reliability and for trainability, but he is doing well for effort and stamina. And so you can pick the stallion with the type of character he's showing in his offspring, what you would like. And the only problem in this is that you see that the reliability, and that's the reliability of the breeding value, so not the reliability of the horse, is that these reliabilities are rather low. They're around 50%, and you would like to see that a lot higher. If you look at conformation traits, our breeding values have a reliability over 70%, 80 or 90%, because we have much more of information of many more offspring. And well, for character, we only have the 20 offspring that's tested per stallion in the ABFP test. So currently we are looking at a way to be able to collect more character information in order to increase the reliability of these breeding values. But at least these breeding values give you an indication what kind of character a stallion is transmitting. So the next one is, and that's rather new, we haven't published them before, and that's the breeding values for competition sport. So that's based on the data that we receive from our sports federation. And well, you see here the stallions with their breeding values for sport, and that's based on the highest level of dressage and driving of the offspring. So we don't include what we would like, rather would do is using all the results of all competitions an offspring has competed, but we are using the highest score in total where a horse is ranking in our sport federation. So this list is ranked on the reliability of the stallions, and you see that that Beard has the highest reliability because he has the most offspring that's competing in sport. You see that he's doing well too with a sport breeding value of 106, and you see quite a bit of variation in breeding values. And of course, we are focusing on our breeding program more on performance tests because they're higher reliable, have a higher heritability, and the information is coming earlier because we're testing 3- and 4-year-olds. But in the end of the day, you want to have also the information of the sport results because the performance tests are predicting the aptitude for sport, and the breeding values for sport is actually based on the sport trait itself. How are the offspring doing in sport? So this is something that we are working on fine-tuning, and later on we will see how we going to implement these breeding values for sport and for character, also in our total merit index. So then our last sheet of this webinar. So how do we select our mares, predicates, or breeding values? That was the question for this evening, for this webinar. And well, we have seen that selection for predicates is very helpful and is moving us in the right direction because we have seen that the offspring of model mares is doing better than the offspring of crown mares, and the crown mares are doing better than the star mares, what we expect. But we also seen that if we select for breeding values, we can have even a higher star percentage in the offspring. So it's more powerful to select for breeding values than to select for predicates. And how we could apply these lists, these top lists, top rankings of mares is that we use our valuable mares for our breeding program, and we would like to use them a little more. For instance, by applying embryo transfer, especially for the mares in the top list, you would like to have more than one offspring a year in order to have a higher genetic progress. And because we have this total merit index, that doesn't necessarily lead to higher inbreeding. Well, those breeding values, they're an excellent tool also for making your choice of stallion. Again, it's a good thing to use the linear score sheet, but it's better to look also to the breeding values because again, in these breeding values also the pedigree of the horse is included. And maybe a little bit in contrast of my conclusions is that you have to realize that breeding values are just a tool for selection and not a goal at itself. Because I've seen now that people try to make matings that brings them to the highest parent average, for instance, for total merit index. but that could be a poor combination, because if one of the traits is a combination of a mare and a stallion that have the both negative trait, you may have a high parent average in total, but you may have one trait that's making that this mare might not even go star. So looking at breeding values is very important. Use them as a tool, not as a goal, and keep a close eye also on the horses behind the breeding values. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you have questions, don't hesitate contacting us, for instance, by email. We'll make sure that you will have the answers. And well, thanks for being with us in this webinar. Stay tuned to our live streams and to our broadcasts of the other webinars. There will be an agenda in the next sheet when the next webinars will be published. Thank you very much.